Va bene ragazzi, adesso abbiamo quelli più importanti. Qua abbiamo gli ultimi statement contro Johnny e gli ultimi statement contro Amber. Comunque io inizierei quelli contro Johnny. Gli ultimi statement contro Johnny. Sono highlights perché quelli là veri duravano 40 e 40. Questi qua sono una decina di minuti. Io direi di iniziare da quelli contro Johnny, visto che sono quelli secondo me che faranno più incazzare. Quindi cerchiamo di finire con una nota positiva.
In Mr. Depp's world, you don't leave Mr. Depp. And if you do, he will start a campaign of global humiliation against you.
Ma è quello che è successo a lui.
A smear campaign that lasts to this very day. He will do everything he can to destroy your life, to destroy your career. That
È
is
successo a
what
lui?
they're saying,
È
ladies and
successo,
gentlemen.
è successo a lui?
And that's what they're trying to get you, the jury, to be an accomplice to.
Ma che stronzo da dire sta roba qua.
It's not surprising, because Mr. Depp
Stavo cercando di rendere addirittura la giuria complici della distruzione della vita di Amber. Mamma mia, si è fatto tutto da sola.
cannot and will not take responsibility for his own actions. It's always someone else's fault. Does the First Amendment give Ms. Heard the right to write the words that she wrote in this article on December 18th, 2018? That's the question. And you cannot simultaneously protect and uphold the First Amendment and find in favor of Johnny Depp on this claim. You simply cannot. You have to decide, should someone be able to write an article like that in the United States of America without being sued successfully, without having to go through the hell that
Come saprei aver detto, martedì si riuniranno, quindi probabilmente prossima settimana.
Ms. Heard has gone through. Think about every piece of evidence that you've heard over the last 6 weeks about his abuse,
Bravo
about
Elfo,
their
sì.
relationship. None of that is in the article. None of it. We all know that it would be a very different article if she had written
Non ridere,
about what she
cazzone.
suffered, that she's told you about over the last 6 weeks. Because he knows the words are true, Mr. Depp says that the words now
Ma sta a piedi nudi quest'uomo? Piedi nudi?
have a defamatory implication. He says the statements are the same as saying, Johnny Depp abused me.
Hanno una scarpa.
But just because he wants to make the article about himself doesn't mean it is. He has to show you that any defamatory implication was designed and intended. Look at number 4. Designed and intended by Ms. Heard to convey the defamatory meaning that he suggests. Just because people might read the article and remember, oh yeah, Amber Heard used to be married to Johnny Depp, and she accused him of abuse, that doesn't mean that she designed and intended defamatory implications in writing about herself. And think about it. If Mr. Depp is right, then virtually any statement that anyone could ever make about their own life that implies anything, implies any involvement with any other person, could be defamatory.
Ma è una grande cazzata questo. Si è fatto un intero processo per capire che invece sta la diffamazione. Ma che cazzata è da dire? Se Johnny Depp ha ragione, allora qualsiasi cosa può essere intesa come diffamazione. No, a meno che non sia vera. Quella non era vera, anzi, abbiamo notato che era un po' l'esatto contrario, che era Amber un po' da abusare. Ma come fa a dire una cosa del genere? È un po' strano da dire, boh.
And that's clearly not what the First Amendment intends. She didn't design and intend the words to be the equivalent of writing Johnny Depp abused me. And you don't have to take her words for it. You can take the words of Terrence Doherty of the ACLU. He said that the op-ed wasn't even Ms. Heard's idea. The ACLU wrote the first draft, and great care was taken in drafting the article so as not to make it about Mr. Depp or Ms. Heard's relationship with him. That's the only evidence presented about Ms. Heard's motive, except her statements that was exactly what she wanted to do. She wanted to talk about her experiences after Johnny Depp. Ms. Heard didn't write the headline. She didn't approve the headline. She had nothing to do with it.
Ma invece no, ha mandato video a tutti.
She was not given notice of the headline. She testified, you saw her testify about the sexual assault that she experienced at the hands of Mr. Depp. You saw her testify about that they're calling her a liar.
Beh,
You saw her on the stand testify with your own mouth, with her own mouth.
l'avete vista testimoniare con la vostra stessa bocca.
Exactly what she went through. For the first time
Non riesce a stare in piedi sto tizio.
in court, because people who have suffered that, they don't want to broadcast that to the world. they want to penalize Miss Heard for not speaking about that earlier. That's ridiculous, and it's insulting, and it's just victim blaming at its most disgusting.
Rotterborn.
The only reference to sexual assault in the article, and you can read the op-ed, is sexual assault that she said she had experienced by the time she was of college age, before Mr. Depp. So there is a reference to sexual violence in that article, but it's not by Mr. Depp. And Mr. Depp can't hold her liable for a headline she didn't write.
Ma Rotterborn è qui, ma sta anche facendo la testimonianza. È capace di bilocazione? Wow. Potentissimo Rotterborn, non sapevo. Si sapesse
And they want
bilocare.
you to think that she republished the headline. Republished the headline by tweeting out the link.
Vediamo
to the
se lo
online
vedono.
version. So let's look at this. This is the tweet that she sent on December 19th.
Costano tanto gli avvocati,
The
merda.
hyperlink says, opinion Amber Heard, I spoke up against sexual violence. That's the online version of the article. As Ms. Heard said, you can't attach, you can't tweet a piece of paper. So when she wanted
Cioè, wow, ma come cazzo fa?
to share that she had written this article, what choice does she have? She has to attach that link. And the jury instructions that you have make clear that a hyperlink is not republication. Forwarding a link on does not mean that you've broadcast the statement again, but that's what they want to make you think. The only way, and the jury instructions that you have, and we don't need to read through them in detail now, but the republication instruction says that merely linking to an article does not amount to republication, but adding content to a linked article may constitute republication. You must determine whether any added content was intended to reach a new audience, and if you find any content added to the hyperlink was intended to reach a new audience, it constitutes a republication.
Sembra che si stanno attaccando al niente, però effettivamente questa è la cosa più importante dove si devono attaccare, visto che tutto il trial è stato per diffamazione. Johnny Depp ha denunciato Amber per diffamazione. Effettivamente, indipendentemente se chi abusa chi, comunque può vincere lei, perché se effettivamente non ci sono stati i minimi per diffamazione, può vincere lei. Possono anche vincere entrambi. Ho letto. Può anche vincere lui, ma la giuria decide che non deve dargli 50 milioni, ma meno. Anche se, a mio modesto parere, già tutto il trial è servito per ribaltare la situazione di Johnny. Secondo me questo è già importante.
There was no content added to the article. Let me be very clear. If Amber was abused by Mr. Depp even one time,
Beh, comunque sia, ha ammesso che l'ha pubblicato lei.
then she was abused by Mr. Depp even one time, then she wins. One time. And we're not just talking about physical abuse.
Ma?
We're talking about emotional abuse,
Beh,
psychological
sono
abuse,
d'accordo.
financial abuse,
Sono d'accordo.
sexual abuse.
L'ha fatto però anche lei, tantissimo.
That's what we're talking about.
Non che serva a nulla, capito? Questo è il rischio. Può essere che l'ha fatto anche lei, però il trial mi ha diffamato.
Let's look at the evidence. You heard Mr. Depp define abuse from his own mouth. He admitted all of that when he talked about his childhood. They're trying to trick you into thinking that Amber has to be perfect in order to win. Even while they're ignoring Jade.
Veramente Amber si può far vedere come la perfetta, non fa un cazzo di niente.
Mr. Depp's many flaws, but don't fall for that trick. Amber's not perfect. None of us are. She's never pretended to be, and that's not what you're being asked to decide. One time, ladies and gentlemen, one time. If he abused her one time, Amber wins. Actually, if he fails to prove that he never abused her one time, Amber wins. So let's take a look at some of the evidence. This was one of the first messages shown to Mr. Depp in his cross-examination. This is a message to Paul Bettany, his drug buddy, early on in their relationship. When he says, let's burn Amber, let's drown her before we burn her. I will f*** her burnt corpse afterwards to make sure she is dead.
Francesco Massia, grazie mille per i 6 mesi. Mua.
Some of the most vile, disgusting language that you could ever imagine.
Ma c'è di peggio.
That is what he said to her at the beginning of the relationship. So let's look at how the relationship was bookended. You remembered Mr. Depp the other day in response to some text that we'll see later saying, I don't write like that. This is a bookend of the relationship. This is after it was over. I asked Mr. Depp to read that top text. You'll remember that was the only thing I asked him to read, and he immediately said I didn't write that text, even though, of course he did. Even though he wrote the text under it that said, hopefully that rotting corpse is decomposing in the trunk of a Honda Civic. That's how he bookended their relationship.
Pat says.
Ladies and gentlemen, these words are a window into the heart and mind of America's favorite pirate.
Che strana frase. America's favorite pirate. Boh.
This is the real Johnny Depp.
Questo è pure girato.
Ladies and gentlemen, these words are a window into the heart and mind of America's favorite pirate. This is the real Johnny Depp.
You can't restore his reputation. You
La nostra preferita per niente fastidiosa. Let's go.
can't give him anything. They didn't tell you that, but the court told you that. And that's a very, very important thing here. He told his story. He had his opportunities. He had his full opportunities to do all of that. And he came in here and lied to you and said he's here to get his reputation back. It's just one of many lies in this case, but it's a really big one. Because here we are, 6 weeks of your time, precious time, 6 weeks of this court's time, for what? For nothing. Only to go after Amber. That's psychological abuse. He's going after Amber for nothing.
50 milioni e carriera sono un sacco.
Because he wants to put her through this again, the third time.
Anch'io vorrei vedere la giuria, ma come sono fatti? Non si può. Perché immagino che se conoscessi anche una di quelle persone, vai là e la convinci. Sono un po' come chi banna su Twitch, no? Anzi, penso sia esattamente quella la roba. Però sì, vorrei vederla tantissimo. Come te le immagini? Io me li immagino bimbi. Sono bimbi, sono tanti bambini. Secondo me quello là, no, è pirata, no, mamma. Non sto facendo critica o satira, me li immagino solamente così.
So we're fighting back, and that's the common thing. She finally has said enough, enough. And we're asking you to finally hold this man responsible. He has never accepted responsibility for anything in his life. Once again, the next day, Johnny apologizes to Amber. He says in 2 different text messages, that's 772 and 773, he says, my profound apologies in one of them, and my apologies are eternal in the other one. What is he apologizing for?
My apologies are eternal? Che cazzo vuol dire, Johnny?
The next day, on May 22nd, if he didn't know that he did all of those things. She wasn't wearing any makeup. She was natural. She wasn't wearing a stitch of makeup. Every one of them says it. It's the exact same thing. Well, why would you say that? She's an actor. She's not going to go outside her house, without putting makeup on. And if she has bruises, why on earth, when she's been covering them up for 4 years, why on earth would she not put makeup on so that she would cover those up? Why on earth would she not want to cover up those bruises? It makes no sense. But you know what? You guys saw her here. You saw Amber on the stand. There were days where she didn't wear eye makeup. A lot of people think that she's not wearing makeup when she doesn't have mascara and eyeliner.
Comunque, l'avvocatessa è bravissima quando ha tempo di parlare. Però ogni volta che faceva domande a Johnny o a qualcuno sembrava veramente in difficoltà. Però il suo carisma è palese, cioè si vede che ha una grande abilità. Mi sta piacendo un sacco adesso, ma quando c'è da fare domande o da gettare l'ancora per quella che è la ragione di Amber, non ce la fa tanto.
She has different looks, and some of them are with eye makeup and some of them are without. And people misunderstand, especially people that aren't that good at makeup, and a lot of men, frankly, go, oh.
In realtà sembra scarsa anche adesso. Beh, il tizio di prima balbettava un casino, almeno lei non sbaglia.
Oh, then she probably doesn't have makeup. And that's where that mistake happens. But you heard her testimony, and you heard her makeup artist testimony saying she doesn't go out of her room without concealer and foundation. She knows how to put these things in. and you saw Defendant's Exhibit 155, and you'll have the actual thing in there. That's the type of palette she used, and she was very adept at telling you what colors she puts on for the different days of bruises. This is a woman who for 4 years did everything she could to cover up anybody knowing anything about this abuse. Do you honestly
Pazzesco, sta dicendo quello che ha fatto Giorno.
think she's just going to walk around for the week with her bruises exposed? Of course she's not. If you do the math, Amber is entitled to at least 31.5. What does she take? 7 million. What does she do with the 7 million? She gives it to charity, or she intends to give it to charity. Now, they make much ado about the pledge versus donation, but both the corporate designees for ACLU and for Children's Hospital said donation and pledge are interchangeable. You know, these are pledges. The ACLU corporate designee said you typically do pledges because of the tax benefits, and that's what she said. She pledged it over a period of time because of the tax implications to it and because she was getting paid over the time. Now, she started to make these donations, and you'll see that the first one was on behalf of Mr. Depp's business manager, Mr. White, actually sent the letters with the 100,000 for each of those. That was the initial ones.
E quando è
He was trying to
successo?
take credit for those, and in fact, both the ACLU and Children's Hospital got confused and gave the credit to Mr. Depp, not to Amber, for those. Then she made payments to both, and Elon Musk also made payments to both for 500,000 each, which she didn't count to her pledge, but they helped those organizations. At the end of the day, she's made $1 million in payments to them, but then she got sued here and hasn't been able to because she spent $6 million in attorney's fees.
Merda! 6 milioni di dollari in avvocati. Effettivamente sì. Anch'io sto spendendo un casino per quei...
That is unrefuted. She still intends to pay those pledges, honor those pledges.
Rotterborn vale 6 milioni? Beh no, ne ha 3. Ah, Rotterborn che si divide in due, sa bilocarsi, e lei, quindi ha 3 persone. Johnny ha loro due che parlano, e mi sa anche loro due sono parte.
From both the ACLU and from Children's Hospital, they haven't expired.
A questo punto dove vedi l'avere bravura di un avvocato, nelle altre circostanze se difendi un colpevole è complicato. Questo punto è il punto in cui capisci quando il costo di quell'avvocato vale, ricordandosi che deve solo convincere una giuria di persone normali. Sono d'accordo.
She can pay them whenever she wants to, and she fully intends to, but she has to get out from under this first. They started to get Amber fired from Aquaman 2. They have continued to this day. They have followed her everywhere. Everybody has stopped wanting her. L'Oreal won't use her, even though they've kept her on from that time. She lost 3 different opportunities that were being discussed with her. The most significant part of that, though, is that Aquaman was the biggest blockbuster ever for DC Films.
Ah sì? Aquaman è il film che ha fatto di più della DC. Mi fate sta ricerchina, ragazzi, che mi sa che siete più bravi di Giovanna qua.
It was the biggest. It was over $1 billion. This was her
Ma
opportunity
veramente?
for her star. Even the experts from Mr. Depp admitted this was her blockbuster. This was her mega. But what happened
vero?
instead? As she's going through, as it's coming out, and in that 16 months they were going, well, nothing happened. Yeah, lots happened. She had 3 different...
Se è vero, 1 miliardo e 200 milioni. Beh, pazzesco, purtroppo è vero. Beh, non per il caso, ma per la gente. Ma che cazzo guardate Aquaman, imbecilli?
Film she was discussing, she got the L'Oreal contract, she got the stand, all of those things were happening because of Aquaman, and then everything shut down. She wasn't allowed to do publicity for the stand. She wasn't allowed to, she hasn't been allowed to do anything for L'Oreal. She got shut down from her charitable organizations. She ended up
Incassi vanno nel
not getting
migliore, ok.
Amazon.
Beh, blockbuster vuol dire incassi, quindi ha ragione.
About Aquaman 2. And instead of the career trajectory of the other comparators, who all went way up, and by the way, all the experts
Qua vediamo lei che assimila mana dal
dal
circostante.
well for all the rest of them, and she's the only one that didn't have it. And the reason is because of the defamatory statements.
La seconda è stata più una roba etica di tutto quello che ha perso, ma il primo comunque ha parlato effettivamente del caso di diffamazione.
On May 27th, 2016, Ms. Heard walked into a courthouse in Los Angeles, California, to get a no-notice ex-parte restraining order against Mr. Depp, and in doing so, ruined his life by falsely telling the world that she was a survivor of domestic abuse at the hands of Mr. Depp. Today, on May 27th, 2022, exactly 6 years later, we ask you to give Mr. Depp his life back by telling the world that Mr. Depp is not the abuser Ms. Heard said he is, and hold Ms. Heard accountable for her lies. Now it's time for you, the jury, to come to a decision. You have been entrusted with a serious task. What is at stake in this trial is a man's good name. Even more than that, what is at stake at this trial is a man's life. The life that he lost when he was accused of a heinous crime, and the life he could live when he was finally vindicated. Exactly 6 years ago today, on May 27th, 2016, Ms. Heard walked into court and filed a false report of domestic abuse against her husband of 15 months, Johnny Depp. The scene was a setup.
Pazzesco. Ti sposi e dopo 1 anno e mezzo in tribunale contro tuo marito. Che cazzo.
She tipped off the paparazzi so they would be waiting. They knew exactly where she would pause, which side of her face to photograph. And the photos captured what she wanted them to see, the image of a battered woman. What the paparazzi did not know is that the dark mark on her face mysteriously appeared 6 days after last seeing Mr. Depp. It was a lie. She knew it, Mr. Depp knew it, and the multiple witnesses you heard from who saw her that week of May 21st, 2016, also knew it. But the world only saw what she wanted them to see. 2 years later, when promoting the biggest role of her career, until this trial, herself to the world as a public figure representing domestic abuse. The headline of the op-ed featured the term sexual violence, even though she had never before accused her ex-husband of such a heinous crime. Ms. Heard and her lawyers love to remind you of how the op-ed did not mention Mr. Depp by name. But Ms. Heard made sure that there would be no mistake about who she was referring to. She inserted,
Grazie,
2
Mario.
years ago, so the world would remember the photo of a battered woman, the mark on her face, standing outside the courthouse. And they would once again see Mr. Depp as the villain, this time in full swing of the Me Too movement. But what was happening behind closed doors was quite different from what Ms. Heard presented to the world. The exact opposite, in fact. There is an abuser in this courtroom, but it is not Mr. Depp. And there is a victim of domestic abuse in this courtroom, but it is not Ms. Heard. The evidence presented at this trial has shown that Ms. Heard is in fact the abuser, and Mr. Depp the abused. As you heard from Mr. Depp and multiple other witnesses that testified under oath at this trial, Mr. Depp experienced persistent verbal, physical, and emotional abuse by Ms. Heard during their relationship. You heard from Mr. Depp about how often Ms. Heard would berate him, insult him, and physically attack him, including one of the most serious occasions when Ms. Heard threw a vodka bottle at Mr. Depp, severely injuring his finger, and then put a cigarette out on his face.
Lotta e giuramento, sì. Minchia se la guarda il culo. Ma poi quale culo?
You heard from Mr. Depp that this whole incident in Australia started because Ms. Heard was enraged that Mr. Depp wanted a post-nuptial agreement, and she wasn't in his will, just a month after getting married. You also heard from Tara Roberts, a manager at Mr. Depp's island, who witnessed Ms. Heard telling Mr. Depp that he was washed up and would die fat and lonely. You also heard from Ms. Roberts that she witnessed Ms. Heard clawing and grabbing at Mr. Depp, grabbing his hair, trying to pull him back to her, and Mr. Depp had a visible injury to his nose on that occasion. Most importantly, you heard from Ms. Heard yourselves on multiple audio recordings, admitting to being physically violent with Mr. Depp. What you didn't hear on a single recording you heard in this case, and there were many played by both parties, is Mr. Depp ever admitting to hitting, punching, or kicking Ms. Heard. You didn't hear it. It doesn't exist.
Che bellina con gli
It
occhiali.
didn't happen. And despite the fact that Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard are heard discussing many of the alleged incidents you've heard about at this trial, like Australia, in the Bahamas.
I che non ti rendono meno stronzo. Forse un po' sì. Che bene sempre, Ave Pingus, tu sei un cazzo allupato.
Never heard Miss Heard accuse Mr. Depp of sexual assault. Unlike Mr. Depp, who you heard admit to and own up to his past mistakes and his struggles, particularly with drugs and alcohol, Miss Heard will not admit that she has ever done anything wrong. But she cannot deny what you heard on those recordings. As much as Miss Heard and her lawyers have tried to make this case about Mr. Depp's language, it is Miss Heard that repeatedly admits to violence. She tries to
Penso di meritare. Quant'è? Mezzanotte, 2300 persone. Mi devono pagare. Pagatemi. Hashtag Zalando paga Marco. Mia madre comprava da Zalando. Cazzo. È una vita che la famiglia Merrino li aiuta.
cover it up with more lies. So let's talk about the giant lie at the heart of this case. Miss Heard's claim that Mr. Depp is an abusive monster and that she is a public figure representing domestic abuse. She spun a story of shocking, overwhelming, brutal abuse. She came into this courtroom prepared to give the performance of her life, and she gave it.
Zalando versus Merrino.
Miss Heard's acting coach, Christina Sexton, testified that Miss Heard has difficulty
Sexton.
crying when she is acting. You saw it. Miss Heard sobbing without tears, while spinning elaborate, exaggerated, fantastical accounts of abuse.
È un po' la voce di tutti noi, la Vasquez, per ora, perché ha molto parlato di quello che è accaduto in aula, delle storie dette, eccetera, che comunque ha un valore, mentre invece quelli di prima hanno parlato molto di quello che è successo al tempo, che è pure un valore, però secondo me dovrebbero anche un po' loro impegnarsi su quello che è successo in passato, visto che è diffamazione quello di cui stanno denunciando Amber, quindi devono far capire che è stato e come.
And everything going on in her mind almost a decade prior while enduring that abuse. It was a performance. What we have is a mountain of unproven allegations that are wild, over the top, and implausible. And you can't pick and choose which of these wild allegations to believe and which ones to disregard. You either believe all of it or none of it.
Beh, non saprei.
Either Mr. Depp sexually assaulted Miss Heard with a bottle in Australia, or Miss Heard got up on that stand in front of all of you and made up that horrific tale of abuse.
Ah, ok. Ok, intendevo in questo senso qua.
Either she's a victim of truly horrific abuse, or she is a woman who is willing to say absolutely anything. But this case doesn't come down to whether you believe Miss Heard or you believe Mr. Depp. This case comes down to whether you believe Miss Heard or you believe Mr. Depp, Christy Dombrowski, Sean Bett, Malcolm Connolly, Travis McGivern, Starling Jenkins, Keenan Wyatt, Dr. Kipper, nurses Debbie Lloyd and Aaron Filati, Tara Roberts, Ben King, Kate James, Kate Moss, Dr. Colber, Morgan Knight,
Dottor Kirby?
Morgan Tremaine,
Dottor Kirby?
Officers Melissa Sines, Officer Patton, Officer William Gatlin, and Beverly
Dottor
Hunt.
Strange? Dottor
What
Wario?
Miss Heard testified
Dottor
to in
Wario?
this courtroom
Non l'avrei mai
is the
detto.
story of far too many women. But the overwhelming evidence and weight of that evidence shows that it's not her story. It's not Miss Heard's story. It was an act of profound cruelty, not just to Mr. Depp, but to true survivors of domestic abuse. For Miss Heard to hold herself out as a public figure representing domestic abuse. It was false, it was defamatory, and it caused irreparable harm. And to talk more about that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and my friend, Mr. Chu.
As Ms. Vasquez said, you have now come to know the real Amber Heard. Scary. We also told you at the start of this trial that you were going to come to know the real Johnny Depp, not the many characters you've seen him play so wonderfully. in the movies, but the man himself.
Che ridi, mamma?
We kept that promise. You've met the real Johnny Depp. Before Amber Heard, ladies and gentlemen, no woman ever before Amber Heard ever claimed that Mr. Depp raised a hand to her in his 58 years.
Questo è importante.
And no other woman since.
È importante perché di solito se lo lasciano scappare gli altri che sono stati denunciati di sexual assault o robe così.
Ms. Heard made that false claim back on May 27th, 2016,
Decide di non ridere in aula, già.
and repeated it in her December
O anche solo sorridere.
2018 op-ed. Has any woman come forward since? This is Me Too without any Me Too. To the contrary, ladies and gentlemen, you heard Kate Moss 2 days ago testify. This is a woman who has never testified in any proceeding, ever.
Wow.
A very private person.
Wow.
Testified that Mr. Depp never abused her and that Ms. Heard lied to you. And she lied to you twice. Beyond the personal and emotional effects of Ms. Heard's lies, their impact on Mr. Depp and his family, the damage she inflicted on his reputation and career is
Leroy!
There's an old saying that a good reputation takes a lifetime to build,
Simp Ingots.
but only a second to destroy.
Simp Ingots.
Mr. Depp spent, in fact, a lifetime building his reputation as one of the greatest actors and movie stars of his generation, an iconic figure respected and liked throughout Hollywood, and
Leroy.
recognized and admired throughout the world. As you've heard in this case, Amber Heard is not a true victim, and Mr. Depp certainly is not an abuser. Again, nobody has come out of the woodwork to say, Me Too. This is the unique and singular Me Too case where there's not a single Me Too. While Mr. Depp's name will be forever tarnished by these horrendous and false allegations, this case is about telling you his story and the truth about what really happened, which you've now heard. It is about restoring his lost reputation. It's about showing Mr. Depp's children, Lily Rose and Jack, that the truth is worth fighting for.
Cazzo.
It is. And it's about restoring Mr. Depp's name and standing in the community to the fullest extent that you can. And you can do something. And only you, ladies and gentlemen, can do that for him. You heard from Mr. Depp yesterday that he has been carrying these outlandish, outrageous stories on his back, pretty stoically, and living them with them for 6 years, and waiting to be able to bring his truth out. And he has told you the truth, the unvarnished truth, even truth that pretty embarrassing. He knew that was going to happen when he brought this case. You've seen the evidence in this case over 6 long weeks, which we again thank you for.
Mamma mia.
That evidence shows overwhelmingly that Ms. Heard's attempt to paint herself as a heroic survivor, an innocent survivor, and Mr. Depp as a terrifying abuser are utterly false. We ask you to please return your verdict for Mr. Depp. We ask you, we implore you to give him his name, his reputation, and his career back. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Samsung paga Marco. Che colpo. Che colpo in culo, veramente. Potente sta roba, ragazzi. Pazzesco che siamo arrivati in questo momento. Troppo importante anche che stia accadendo questa roba qua. Per quanto bimbesco e stupido possa sembrare in alcuni momenti, e lo è sembrato tanto. E ci siamo veramente divertiti. Ce l'ho scelto come content principalmente perché Amber non ci sta con la faccia, figuriamoci con quello che c'è dentro. Però quante cose abbiamo imparato e quante cose sono successe. Da pazzi, è stato un bel viaggio. Sì, 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 sì. Puoi fare un piccolo riassunto? Non ho capito tutto. La difesa di Amber l'ha buttata moltissimo sul fatto che effettivamente non si trattava di diffamazione visto che era vero. E anche quando lei ha ritwittato il post, non l'ha ritwittato tutto, ma non l'ho capito. Però si sono molto fissati sul fatto che comunque sia, se anche una volta sola avesse abusato di lei Johnny, non è diffamazione, perché vuol dire che è vero. Secondo me può essere che vince lei e giocano molto su questa roba qua. Sarebbe anche un buon gioco, sarebbe vero, perché ricordiamolo, sono in tribunale perché Johnny l'ha denunciata per diffamazione e vuole da lei 50 milioni. Perciò lei può essere anche una che abusa, ma se non è stata abusata, può essere una che abusa, ma se lei è stata abusata, comunque quella non è diffamazione. Penso che potremmo benissimo entrare in quella linea temporale. Sì, ma lei è presentata come abusata con l'occhio nero, loro coinvolgono abusi non solo fisici ma anche psicologici, la cosa non mi pare troppo sensata. Beh, da che mondo è mondo, gli abusi psicologici sono anche degli abusi, certo. Sono peggio quelli fisici? La gente dice dipende, no. L'ho spiegato un miliardo di volte, anche perché io li ho ottenuti quelli fisici. Quelli fisici sono sia fisici che psicologici, non fa solo male alla guancia quando ti danno uno schiaffo, fa male al cuore. Tra parentesi, alla guancia se ne va dopo un giorno, forse un'ora. Al cuore rimane per sempre. Ed è vero. Sono in realtà d'accordo sulla roba. Un abuso psicologico è un abuso. E se lei